All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 6 of the MC Event Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joey Capollo, joined as always by Gilan.
Hello, I'm Gilan. I'm a Java developer working on events with Joey.
And I am Joey, as I just said, owner and operator of Block Wars as well as the MCC Highlights channel. So I just had a great weekend of Block Wars Origins and Block Wars 4 before that. And today's episode of Talking About Events, we're going to talk about theming, specifically your events theme.
The importance of a theme is that every day there's more and more Minecraft events being made. And at the end of the day, Minecraft looks the same no matter where it is. So it's very important to change how it looks, how it feels, so that, if you're having content creators play in your event, it doesn't feel like they're doing the same thing over and over again, or even worse, they're playing the same event they did last week, except yours is worse and less fun. You want to have something that really spices it up, something that makes it more interesting.
Yeah, the theme is the idea of having your event be a unique experience that's all very cohesive and it goes together. So, in the same way that the name says you know what to expect, then there's also the games match kind of the name of the event and what's going to happen. Our recommendation is to try to stay away from basic themes such as the just mini game or arcade or tournament formats because they've been done to death at this point, with MCC having the biggest hold over like the mini game format and also kind of a carnival-esque scene. And I think the best arcade theming we saw was back from Retro Rivals, which had all very arcade classic games and themed very well in that sense. But we're going to dive into the different ways theming can happen in this episode, and also like what are recommendations for, what kind of theme you'd want to make your event stand out and be exciting, as well as talk about how the new Minecraft update has really added a lot of possibilities for theming, which is really the first thing we're going to talk about, right, Gilan?
Yeah, I wanted to first take a break to talk about 1.19.4. I believe that's the most recent update. It's funny how recently Mojang's been releasing these like in between major updates, but some of them are very important. A few of them break chat on one of the testing servers we had and would kick people, but some of them are good. So the big thing I think that people are most excited about from 1.19.4 is display entities. So anyone who's ever done any sort of technical thing in Minecraft, even sometimes in survival, you've probably had to deal with this. Armor stands are a big deal for displaying stuff. When you go onto a server such as, MCC Island right now, all those custom models you see in the lobby, almost all of them are an armor stand that is basically holding an item that the resource pack, the texture pack you're using, is changing to look like a cool 3D model. The issue you have is that Minecraft is designed so it only draws stuff on your screen if you're looking at it, because it doesn't want to waste time calculating lighting and other things for something you're not looking at. So you have this issue where if you have an object that is bigger than the actual real armor stand, bigger than the hitbox of the armor stand, in normal Minecraft, as soon as someone looks away where the normal armor stand would be, it stops rendering it. So I think the best example is if you go on a lot of servers that have custom models, such as like Origin Realms or MCC Island, as I mentioned, if you get really close to a model and you start turning your camera slowly, you'll notice that sometimes it'll just like pop out of existence. And display entities are designed in a way to fix this. The idea is that no longer do you have to have these weird armor stand that's invisible and then showing an item. Instead, you can just display the item in space, manipulate however you want. You can rotate it, and you can set the size of how big the hitbox is. So it, if you wanted something that players can punch, it's bigger than it's supposed to be. Or if you want to make sure that it doesn't disappear like that, you just make it big enough that it covers the entire model.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to make it much more interactable than the current entities are that you have to use with armor stands, and have them just look better, be easier to utilize, and be easier to customize.
Because actually one of the other things is animating armor stand, like having an armor stand move, which has been the way to usually get those like clean animations where you see like some sort of, I believe a good example is actually it was Manicube, which is a weird one to mention, had like a RPG thing or like an MMO they made for like a couple weekends, And they had these really cool monsters that were made this way, where they're basically armor stand characters, but they were kind of laggy at times because if you have a bad
Mm-hmm.
connection to the server, their limbs would break. But these new display entities, basically, it's called interpolating, where like all it will do is show you like the server will tell you they have their arm up and now they have it down, and the game will basically calculate the in between for you, and it'll have much cleaner animations. And it's just more general control over how it's rotated, the scaling of it, which has always been a really annoying thing. But the other cool thing that is a little less helpful, but it can be, especially if you're doing command block focused
Mm-hmm.
ideas, is interaction entities, where it'll actually be able to check if someone's punching it or right clicking on it,
Mm-hmm.
which can be very helpful. It might not be as helpful on a server because a lot of times with plugins you can do that already. But it can be very helpful if you're trying to make maps or if you have, a small command block project with your friends.
Mhm. It's a way of having, targets that people could shoot at that aren't just target blocks, but instead are entities that you then can check for.
Mhm,
It's the idea of you can just have a lot more easily be customizable things and options to give greater flexibility and creativity for all of your ideas.
mhm. And not as helpful if you're, working on plugins, but the ride and damage command have been added, which will be very helpful for command block projects and also just map making if you're
Mm-hmm.
into that too. Riding both of those have been things that with plugins have been very easy. There's literally like dot damage dot set passenger if you're writing in, Java or Kotlin. Um, but now you can do that in base Minecraft in a much easier way if you need to.
Mm-hmm. But so yeah, with the 1.19.4 update, there's just a lot easier ways to do some of these things that help add theming, help add life and pizzazz to your event. And so not only are those the important things to kind of consider as we update to 1.19.4 and see all the things you could that are possible. We don't even know everything's possible with it yet. We got to wait for all the experts to, show off their skills and then see what all we can do, but it's obviously already a lot. Outside of those things, the first thing for theming is building. The look of your event is mainly related to how the builds look. How do the maps play? How's the hub look? How does actual things in Minecraft look? And how does that relate to the theme? If you want to think of something like the classic multiplayer servers like Hypixel, it's kind of just given the Minecraft look. Like it's slightly medievally style. Some of the our hubs and lobbies are more themed based on what game modes are in them, but it just is kind of a Minecraft look. Whereas you compare that to MCC, it's much more colorful. It's meant to feel like the summer festival kind of vibe they have going on, and it helps set the stage for what's going to happen in it.
Yeah, it's very important to put time into that because even if you have a really good games and people are having lots of fun, the surroundings do matter because not only do you want the content creators to have fun or our competitors to have fun, but we want to make sure that people watching the event are like seeing
Mm-hmm.
these nice visuals surrounding the game because it's actually when you put nice things around the game, it'll make the game people will like the game more. It doesn't always make sense on paper because it's like the game's the same. We just added this map around it. But a lot of times it'll just kind of make the entire experience more full. It'll really make them feel like they're, immersed in the actual game itself.
Yeah, and it really just adds a sense of, scale, adds a sense of a connection between all of the actual games that you're playing and just gives it something to understand if this is what's going on. I think a good event that could be said for, that building's not necessarily always important was it Cross Championship or Chillers Championship?
I think it was Chillers.
It was Chillers. And not to say that their building was bad anyway, that just wasn't their priority. Their priority was good gameplay, and they sacrificed style to make sure games just were fun. And all the people who played in it still had fun, but it missed out on kind of that theming aspect because the builds weren't to like a very high degree, very high standard.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that was a conscious choice by them. So, not saying anyway it's a bad thing, but to notice that if you don't have builds, well, then you need to make sure you're entirely focused on gameplay and make sure it's fun. Whereas you do have builds, your gameplay can lack just a little bit because then the builds help make up for it.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of think about builds in the way that I think about like having good graphics in games,
Mm-hmm.
like just general video games. Like it's ironic because we're making stuff in Minecraft, which is the common like, wow, I can't believe Minecraft is one of the most played games in the world. It's like literally just a boxy game, like compared to RTX on kind of
Mm-hmm.
crazy looking games. But it is because if you make your game unique another way, you don't need to have the amazing builds. Because if you think about it from the other direction, there have been events that have had all their work put into builds. It's
Mm-hmm.
all hired a build team to make the entire thing, and it looks great, beautiful, but the builds aren't. I mean, the actual game itself is not that fun, and it's like, well, it's great. We're surrounded by this gigantic setting, and like it's not actually fun whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that trade-off where you have to think about, builds can't make up for a bad event.
True. It's a thing of they all have to be working together, all the different aspects to be able to function and have this quality theme, quality event to run smoothly. And then obviously building is like call it the setting in a sense, the building is.
Mhm.
And then the resource pack is kind of the set dressing for what goes on top of it because obviously Minecraft blocks are limited in the colors and kinds you have. Resource packs allow you to change that, add your own creativity into it, and also make items more unique and custom.
Yeah, I think resource packs are not necessary. I think we should put that out there because
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. I mean, we've had this experience trying to get a pixel artist, like someone who has experience with pixel art. And also, one of the difficulties is someone who is knowledgeable enough about Minecraft resource packs that they can know what they have to make. Because sometimes, you have someone like, yeah, they can make the art, but someone else has to tell them which parts they make. Because, like, if a person's just a pixel artist, how do they know that, oh, yeah, furnaces have a different texture when they're on versus off? Like, they don't know
Mm-hmm.
that. They don't know exactly how the format for a resource pack is supposed to be. Because at that point, it starts getting into, like, file management and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it is important that you can have a default resource, like events can have a default resource pack and still be fine. I wouldn't be stressing if you don't have one. And honestly, you can also do a thing where not everything has to be a custom
Mm-hmm.
texture. Like you don't have to make an entire resource pack that changes everything. I mean, if you look at something like MCC, most of the items are the same. They leave those in place.
The other thing you could do is find a texture pack that you do like that's already out there and use that
Mm-hmm.
to, augment the things you're using within your builds. Because I do think when you use just the default pack, you are going to struggle to make it feel um,
Mm-hmm.
in any specific theme that's not kind of like the medieval Minecrafty feel, because that's what all the blocks kind of fit into already.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to make that space themed or futuristic or something else kind of theme like that, you'll want to find a resource pack that then allows you to make it feel more like that and give you more options when you're building.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, resource pack isn't necessary for a lot of events. It just helps add, the set dressing.
Yeah.
Add a little cherry on top to make it all feel a little more custom, unique, and cool. And then another set dressing or another piece on top you could have is the music. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
we already had an episode on this. We
Yes, we did.
interviewed Stein about music stuff. So if you want to, after you watch this or after you listen to this, maybe you can go back and listen to that one because we go into more detail. But kind of a quick summary. Um, Music is hard to make. It's kind of like not everyone can make good pixel art. Not everyone can make good music. So it is something that you have to put time into, or find someone who's able to put time into it. Um, but it can get that level of immersion, and especially for theming. I mean, like if you're trying to, make a pirate themed event, if you have kind of like pirate sounding music, that really brings everything together.
Mm-hmm.
That really makes players, because music can give people that like emotional feeling and like make them really feel like they're in the moment and kind of hype them up.
It can also just set the stage for each game and how like it's supposed to be played. If you have a game that's supposed to be fast and action packed, and the music is then fast with it, players are then going to play more aggressively and faster. Whereas if the
Mm-hmm.
music's very chill, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I'll sit back and chill. I'm not ready go looking for a fight here." So just having the music help set the stage of what you want, games to play as or the event to play as a way to get players in the right mindset for it.
Mm-hmm.
But as we said, there's a whole episode for it. You can listen to us talk more in depth. And after music, I think this is probably the hardest topic to figure out is names. What do you name your
Yeah.
event? What do you name your games? What do you name your teams? What do you name your maps? Naming is really hard.
Yeah, I think it's important to go through iterations. Uh, give things temporary names and don't fall in love with them too much. Be
Mm-hmm.
willing to change them later, because you know at the end of the day, you know, the fact that MCC has, their like the team names are the what alliteration kind of like colorful
Mm,
animal names like that's kind of part of the whole like carnival theme. Like every team's a different like bright color and they all have
mm,
their own like little animal representing them. Like that's kind of part of the theming. That's how like like yeah, that's the lime llamas. Like that's their theming for that. And those names really bring things together. It's because a lot of times when people are going to talk about your event, they're going to mention the names in it. You don't want a name that's just like, oh yeah, this is the fighting game. Yeah, fighting game. It's like, well, what does that even mean?
mhm.
Like, give it a more interesting title.
Just touching on team names again, MCC kind of has in some ways, the ownership to color name than animal name for teams.
Mhm.
And while plenty of events have obviously done as well, Block Wars and others, everyone kind of reverts back to this calling teams the same thing, which is red, orange, yellow. Like even though it's Scarlet Sharks or Golden Gorillas in Block Wars, people say the red team or the yellow team.
Mhm.
Even though PB has their Greek mythology named teams, it's still people call it the red team or the orange team or the color team because that we're used to. So my recommendation would be don't name it color than animal. Instead, find another way to name it that will make people actually say the team you want them to say. But
Mhm.
if you notice, like all you on the developed team are saying, "Oh, this is red team," and it's like actually a really long name that everybody calls the red team, then the fans are also going to call it the red team.
Mhm. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay to have
Mm-hmm.
some sort of fancy name for it, and people don't call it that. But if it shows up on screen, like you can think of it, it's still part of your theming.
Yeah. And then for the event name, obviously it goes with your theme, but I don't think you should think of the event name first. You should pick the theme first, then decide on a name for that. But then also
Hmm.
be willing to kind of change it up as if it doesn't feel quite right during development or something, feels a little better. And then game names, the theming for them doesn't have to be anything specific. Block Wars used to have every game was one word, was kind of the
Hmm.
theme, but it wasn't that it's not really a theme. And we've gone away from that because it didn't actually change anything or matter. So I
Hmm.
don't necessarily know if your game names have to be strictly themed, but they need to at least feel similar. Like
Hmm.
you don't want a game like right what currently have like Extraction, and you don't want a game also that's called like the Battle for the Center of the Wool, or like something that's like a bunch of words when you have like regular sounding game names. Like they should all kind of feel related. And then for naming maps, just have the map names, make sense for the map people are playing on. About all there is to that, so that you can then players, fans, whoever can talk about it and be able to differentiate between one they played in an earlier event versus a later event if you do end up switching maps.
The next thing to look at would be the actual game design, because just having a theme and then like having like here's 8 games, we'll just name them like the theme and move on. You kind of want your games to kind of fit your theme, so it really feels like it's part of the event. Because if you just have like, yeah, we're gonna play, it's like tag, and it's like you have like a sci-fi event, like it's like, well, maybe design some sort of sci-fi thing, like maybe have people have jetpacks or something. I don't
Or
know.
laser tag. It's right
Or yeah,
there.
laser tag, yeah. Laser tag. Oh, you're giving me PTSD with yeah. Uh, you can you can design, the games themselves around it, or as I said, like mechanics in the game can be based around your theme is a great way to do it. And it also builds on the idea it'll make your games less like basic. We talked about early on the idea that like just having very simple games that's like other events isn't that fun. You should try to find a unique spin that makes your
Mhm.
game better. And that unique spin you can sometimes find by thinking about what fits your theme. Like that's a great way to guide you to some unique mechanics that can make your game very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, going with the space theme or futuristic theme, or however you want to conceptualize that. It then would make sense to have games that are like zero gravity or on
Hmm.
spaceships or have lasers or have all these other things that you wouldn't get in other themes and settings.
Yeah.
And instead you're getting your ideas from your theme and you're having them kind of work together to make sure everything feels cohesive and similar. And I think the other thing too is that Minecraft mini games can all kind of feel the same. There's only so many mechanics players can do that result in games. Like there's PvP, there's movement, and then there's team-based games. I'd argue that there's a few other kinds, but they're kind of still fall into those three big categories. So when you only have those three kinds of mechanics, you need to make sure the games feel different in just their focus and their theme to then be able to stand out. And then after you've designed your games, there's still, you got to market your event. And I think it's the thing we think about the least, probably, is that your event needs to be heard of so that it can then be popular and people will play in it. And it's not necessarily like if you're a developer like Gilan or just an organizer, video editor like me, you don't necessarily know how to like make it sound exciting and get people to come play. It's not really your focus. You just want to make a cool thing. But I say when it comes to marketing, the theming helps give you unique stuff to use. If you're going to announce teams for your future event, you could mimic the Star Wars title crawl sequence in some way to announce it. Or you could have, something where spaceships are flying by and then it announces who the teams are. There's like lots of different things you do to show off your teams, or with social media posts, or just the graphics of it that would tie into the theme. That would then make it feel much more interesting and it would stand out both on Twitter, on Discord, or wherever you're saying this event is happening.
Yeah, I do think one thing that a lot of events, especially if you're doing content creator events, the one thing you're probably going to have is team announcements. You're announcing who's going to be on there. And there's a certain level of like, MCC kind of had their team announcements format. They go team by team, put the profile pictures, who's in it, at them, that kind of idea. And a lot of the other events have copied that. And I do think to a certain point, the reason is because that's actually really effective, because it's just like clearly showing who's on each team. It gets people to understand like, hey, I know that person. I'm going to watch them during the event. And you at them so that they can respond and be like, yeah, I'm so happy to be in this event, that kind of thing. But I do think there is kind of area to have fun with that. Like if you want a more unique idea, like I believe it was out of all events, I think it was the Pizza Hut one.
Yes.
Didn't like Pizza Hut sponsor
Yep.
event. In their event, their team announcements, they actually made like a 3D render of like all on for one of the team or for all the teams like of their Minecraft characters like running, and like they put like pizza themed stuff around it and like announced it, and they had all their like Minecraft skins like in like they're like running through something. There's like pizza stuff in the background, all those things. So it's a very cool way to introduce it that kind of stands out more while still kind of including who's in the event, so it's kind of clear.
Yeah.
So I do think like thinking about that kind of side of it, of like what makes it stand out, not just like if you're one of those people, because like if you think about it early on, there's going to be a lot of people if you're running an event who are like, ooh, I kind of want to watch this event. But those people are going to be the same ones who are going to be seeing team announcements over and over and over again. They're like, well, oh, another panel showing 4 or 5 profile pictures with them at an event, but you want to stand out a bit when you're fighting for that presence.
Yep, that is the goal. I think another one that that stood out in some ways was MC Wipeout for team announcements recently. It was just a clean render of the 3 people on the team standing in front of like the goal line or the starting line, and this had the background showing, this is MC Wipeout. And it wasn't. I think it just did a good job of not being 3 people in a panel or 3 people with 3 headshots showing this is their profile pic, this is their name. And that's enough to stand out because everyone's been going in the same direction for so long. So it doesn't have to be 3D renders, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but just any ways they're going away from that current format is going to help you stand out. And then moving on from here, we're going to go through 3 examples of kind of good theming, or theming you could kind of look to if you need inspiration or understanding, what makes quality theming. And the first one for that would be EVNT's X Games event, which was the winter sport themed event.
Yeah, that was a cool one to watch. I remember I tested for that one because that was one of the last ones that Dotwave did that was still in their Discord server. So they were still just like doing announcements of like, can people come on to test it? And I kept stealing the helicopter because they forgot to protect the model, and I was able to right click and pick it up. It was kind of funny. But anyway, they did have this very cool, the lobby was all like snowy. They of course had all the X Games stuff around, but they had, kind of like snowmen and like snowboards and all those kinds of things. It kind of made you feel like, yeah, this is a winter snow themed event. One of the games they played was Spleef, where you're literally breaking snow. Like it fits the theme very well. Like that's a good example of a game that kind of like, oh yeah, you're like, it's a snow, you have your shovels, you're digging snow. Like that's part of the theme. So I really liked how they kind of embodied that winter theme, especially since, like, that was one that I believe was that the one on ESPN?
Yes, that was the one ESPN
Yes,
that
that
they
was
were.
one on ESPN. So it kind of like embodied, like, yeah, it makes it very clear to even people who are not familiar with what Minecraft events are, like, oh, it's like a winter themed Minecraft thing. Like that, it makes it very clear to them what it is.
It was just a easy way. Like there wasn't a ton of custom like snow stuff or anything like that. It was just using our Minecraft had, make it clear that our
Mhm.
theme is winter, and then just make everything fall in line with that. And then the other event that also came from Dot Wave, but and Bisec was their Game Masters event from almost a year. Is it a year ago at this point, or it's like 5 months ago? It's a while
I
ago,
think it was only like half. I forgot. It might be like 6 months ago.
probably something like that.
Um, time doesn't make sense anymore. Um, but that one was. I mean, we talked about sci-fi theme a bit, but that was kind of a space theme one. The parkour that they would like the lobby was in like a spaceship. There was like a parkour section where you were kind of in this like spaceship hangar and you're doing parkour. There was that really cool like side scrolling one where you're like in F5 mode and you're like this little astronaut and you're like almost playing like a platformer. And that one, of
Mhm.
course, you're this little space guy. You're in space. You're like on these different planets. So it's like a good example of again like really embodying the theme and making it feel like, yeah, we're in space and we're doing space things and there's lasers and spaceships. It's a good example of really making that event feel unique.
And then even that parkour they did with the third person, um, using that to be unique, it fit the theme. Like the idea
Hmm.
was you're the astronaut, and so you have kind of different gravity. And so if you go with, it feels like slightly lower gravity, and then you have that view, and now feels like a in space parkouring section. And so it made it feel like still it was part of the theme and part of how it was supposed to be.
Hmm.
But then the event we have to talk about because it is the big event, which is MCC, and its theming. As I said, it's kind of like this summer festival slash cartoon theme that kind of just, it's hard to put into words, but every time you see their new stuff, you go, oh, that fits the theme.
Hmm. Yeah, I know there was a joke. I forgot who I was talking this about. Where like whenever Noxcrew releases a map, there'll always be someone who's like, "Well, I didn't even see the Noxcrew logo, and I knew it was a Noxcrew map because it just felt like one."
Mm-hmm.
Like that idea. Because sometimes they get like hired to like make one for another, like the Batman one. For
Yeah,
they made like a Batman one on Bedrock. Um, but to a certain extent, there is kind of like, yeah, that Nox Crew feel where they do have this kind of cartoony style, this very like clean pixel art with the all, so many 3D models in it.
mm-hmm.
If you go on MCC Island, you can walk right up to them and look at them. But even when you're watching the event, like there's just so many 3D models. But it's funny because even if you took all those out, it would still feel like MCC. Because even if you go back to like the first MCC where
Yeah,
they had much, much less, it still feels like MCC, which I think embodies the idea that you don't always need a resource, but you don't always need like all these models and resource
yeah,
packs. You can still fit a theme without it. It's just MCC has the ability to do this, and it does, really push them to the front
yeah.
when they work on these things.
And seeing that difference from MCC 1 to MCC now 29, you
Why
can
not?
kind of
Yeah.
see how their theme stayed the same throughout it, but it pushed them forward of how they want to make changes. Like every new edition was like, this makes sense for this theme. This is how this should evolve and grow naturally. And it wasn't like this is a sharp change that then people had to adjust to. It all felt very natural and it felt very realistic to what the theme of the event was.
Yeah, I mean, a good example is for Rocket Spleef Rush. If you look at the cannons that they had, like the little arm cannon things,
Mm.
like those are 3D models now. Originally, did those used just to be a shovel?
They just were
Was
shovels,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, it was just a shovel for original Rocket Spleef. Those have been, changed to fit the theme where they kind of have that like cartoony, like mad scientist kind of feel that
Mm.
a lot of Noxer stuff has. The new lobby, the way it's like floating in the air, and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of the blueprints that they showed for how it looks like that kind of fits that same theme. So it's really just the idea, like if you pick a theme and you really think about it a lot, it'll it'll actually fuel your creativity because it's kind of something to go by. It's not just like reaching into the unknown and being like, yeah, let's implement that and let's add
Mm-hmm.
that. Like you can actually kind of have this guide of like, what can I add to make it feel more like this? Because there's kind of this goal you're trying to reach of a certain theme.
Yeah. And I think there's still plenty of themes out there that haven't been fully explored. I think the ones that are mainly saturated are the cartoony mini game slash arcade feel.
Mhm.
But whereas like anything futuristic or space related, even medieval stuff, like dinosaur stuff, pirate stuff, as you said,
Mhm.
there's plenty of other themes out there that like just look to other games, other video games. Like what themes did they use? Think about Super Mario Bros. That has themes per level, like a water level or sand level or jungle level. Those it's kind of the same thing we're looking here, which is there are so many themes that are very general, and then you can narrow it in to kind of make something clearly unique and fun.
Yeah.
But that's enough about themes for today. Gillen, what are we going to talk about next week?
Um, I don't know. I think would it be possible to get someone to interview about something?
So for next week, we don't know yet which guests we're going to get. We're either going to have Maya to talk development side as one of the lead devs on Block Wars, or Donut to talk building stuff as one of the lead builders on Block Wars, or Wolfie, who is the player manager, so he's the one who helps make teams and get the people into Block Wars. We'll have one of those three people on. We don't know yet. Depends on their schedules and ours.
Mhm.
But so stay tuned for that, and we will see you next time.